Hi, and welcome to another in the series of over-the-shoulder Solaris 11 tutorials. In today's tutorial, we're going to have a look at a new feature of Solaris 11 called branded zones. Branded zones allow the user to have a local zone on their system that has a different brand as the actual global zone. So in this case, today we're actually going to install a Solaris 10 branded zone on a Solaris 11 system. So some of the main reasons that somebody may want to be able to do this would be that they want to take advantage of some of the new hardware that's available available for Solaris 11, but also to be able to support some of the applications that they have that are only validated or in fact may only work on Solaris 10. Another example may be a developer who wants to ensure that the work that he's doing is backward compatible to Solaris 10, as well as running on the newer Solaris 11 OS. So before we start actually creating this zone, we're just going to do a couple of checks on the system and set up some stuff so that we're actually able to go. So the first thing we're going to do is create an actual directory so that the zone has somewhere to put its file system. We're just going to call it file system for zone. Then, because part of the process that we're going to go through to create the zone, we're going to need to know about its network interfaces. We're going to use dladm, a new command within Solaris 11, to show us our interfaces. And in fact, we can take advantage of another new feature of Solaris 11, which is the vanity naming structure of network cards, so that we actually don't really need to know that it's an IGB interface here, because it's named net 0. So we're actually going to use the vanity name of net 0 when we go along and create this new branded zone. So the two main commands that we're going to use to do this are zone config to actually set up the zone, and then zone ADM to start it, install it, boot it, and then interact with the zone. So before we start, we'll use zone ADM to just show the current state of the system by way of zone. So we see that there's just a global zone running. It's mounted at the root path, or the root file system, and it's a brand of Solaris. So now we're going to use zone config -z. We're going to use a fairly common naming structure and call it the global zone with just the Z1, denoting the first zone on this system. So it's telling us that there's no zone configured called this name, which isn't surprising. So we're going to use the create, and we're going to pass the create the -b flag to indicate that it's going to be a branded zone. We're going to set its brand to be Solaris 10. So all these parameters that I'm passing here interactively could all be done on one line and passed to zone config in one go, but for the sake of the tutorial today, we're going to do it interactively. We're going to tell it the path that we created. And we're going to ask it to auto boot. Now I'm going to add a network interface to it. Give it an IP address. And now we're going to tell it what type of network card it is, but because vanity naming is set up here, we can just call it net 0. I'm going to end the configuration of the network card, and we're going to use info to show us the information that we're after adding. So this is showing us back the information we just told it, the name of the zone, the path to it, what type of brand it is, that it's going to auto boot. Then there's a number of other parameters that we didn't set, which for the sake of today's tutorial aren't relevant, but could be very relevant in a real-world example when you're setting this up for deployment. It's telling us the address and the physical network card. So we're going to use verify to ensure that there's nothing conflicting here on the system. And we see that there is, because we haven't told it what type of how we're going to use the network card. So we're actually going to tell it we're going to have it as shared. Very useful feature of the verify is making sure that the system is happy with everything we've done. So we're going to commit these changes. And now we're going to see what the state of the system is now with regard to zones. So again, we obviously see the global zone is running, but now we see that the local zone Clonakilty Z1 is configured. We see its path. We also see its brand is Solaris 10, and we see that its IP is shared, which is one of the things we corrected there at the end. Next thing we have to do now, after it's being configured, is to actually install it. So we're going to use Zone ADM. We're going to use a flower archive that I've previously prepared, which means that it's going to be relatively quick for this to happen. But we'll still we'll pause the capture while we're doing that, just so that people aren't looking at a blank screen for too long. Tell it what we want to do, install. A couple of relevant flags, and then point it at the flower archive that I've created earlier. And because it's an x86 system, it's a x4270. In fact, we're going to pass it the flower archive for that architecture. And this is Solaris 10 Update 9 flower archive. So now we see that the installation started. It's creating the file system for us, and it's also telling us where the log of the install is being piped to. So it's telling us that it's going to take a couple of minutes. So while it's actually doing this work, we'll just pause the capture and we'll start up again when we get a bit more information from the system. So now we're back. The install was successful. We see a few messages coming from the installation there telling us things like that it had to update the image to run within a zone, etc. So now if we have a look at Zone ADM again, we'll see that the state of the zone has changed from configured to installed. So the next thing we're going to have to do now is to actually boot the zone. When we do that, we're going to then console into the zone and configure it as we'd have to configure a new installation. We could, of course, set up a sysid config to do that automatically, but just to show for the sake of today's tutorial that this is a real install, we're going to go through the process of setting up this zone ourselves. So we're going to boot it. So again, if we go back and have a look at the state of the zones, the state will have changed now from installed to running, and now we're going to log in through the console to the zone. So now we're going to answer a few questions that people would have been used to answering when they do a normal install. It's telling us that it's setting up some private keys, configuring the network interface, and now we'll answer a few questions so the system knows how to talk to its network. It knows its name already. Going through these quickly. Of course, these answers will be different for everyone else. I just have these to hand so I know I can configure the system. And now we'll tell it IPv4 domain. should be very nearly finished now, just to tell it where we actually are. Give it a root password. So it's rebooting to reflect all those changes I made. When it comes back up, and there it goes, straight back in, and we're able to log in. Excellent. So now we're on Solaris 10 zone that's been hosted by a Solaris 11 global zone. So I hope that gives an indication of how straightforward it is to create Solaris 10 zones on a Solaris 11 host. And I hope you have fun investigating this new feature and are able to roll it out and add value to your clients and customers. I hope you enjoyed this and look forward to you seeing new, other tutorials in this series. Bye-bye.